Grayson's thumb hovered over the screen. Another swipe, another stranger. He wasn't really paying attention anymore. He had downloaded the app just to test it. That's what he told himself. It was late. He couldn't sleep. His mind was too loud. He stared at the soft glow of his phone in the dark. Swipe, swipe, pause. Then everything stopped. There, on the screen, was her face. Lila. His wife. Grayson blinked hard, like maybe he was hallucinating. But the photo didn't go away. It was real. She was smiling, that soft, effortless smile he hadn't seen in months. Her hair was curled the way she used to do it for special dinners. She wore the white sundress he remembered from their trip to Greece. The name said, Lila, 32, 5 miles away, just like always. Grayson's heart kicked in his chest. He tapped on the profile. More pictures loaded. Another one at a rooftop bar, laughing with a cocktail in hand. One in a mirror. Their mirror. The guest bathroom in their house. She was wearing the earrings he bought her for their anniversary, the marble countertop, the small crack on the edge. It was their home. His thumb froze. His chest tightened. Then he read the bio. Not looking for anything serious, just someone who still believes in fun conversations and unexpected kisses. Grayson felt the world tilt under him. Not in some dramatic, crashing way. Just quiet. Heavy. He set the phone down on the bed and stared at it, like it might explain itself. But it didn't. It just stayed there, glowing. It was her, his wife, on a dating app. Grayson didn't move. The glow of the phone lit up the room around him, casting a pale reflection on the window glass behind the bed. Outside, the city lights blurred through the darkness. Inside, everything was suddenly still. It couldn't be real. He leaned forward, picked up the phone again and stared harder. Maybe it was an old profile. Maybe it was leftover from years ago. Something she forgot to delete. But the photos were new. He recognized the earrings she wore in one. The background of another was unmistakably from last week's dinner at her sister's house. The same dress, same hair. She had taken that photo in the guest bathroom while he was downstairs talking to her brother-in-law about the market. He felt sick. His thumb hovered over the report button, then the message button, then nothing. He dropped the phone on the nightstand and sat in the dark, staring at the floor. What was he supposed to do with this? He wasn't angry, not yet. It felt like he'd been pushed underwater, like the world had tilted and now the floor was sideways. After a few minutes he stood and walked slowly down the hallway. The hardwood creaked softly beneath his feet, the familiar sound suddenly foreign. Her door was half closed. Light spilled out from the crack. He paused outside it. He could hear the TV playing low, some show she liked to keep on for background noise. He raised his hand and knocked. Yeah? Her voice was casual, like nothing had happened, like his heart hadn't just been dropped into ice water. He pushed the door open. Lila was sitting on the bed, wearing an old hoodie and leggings. Her knees were drawn up, laptop open beside her. When she saw him, she raised an eyebrow. "What's up?" Grayson didn't speak right away. He just held up the phone. "I found something," he said quietly. She looked at the screen and froze. The moment stretched. Her face didn't twist in horror. She didn't laugh or yell. Her body didn't jolt like she'd been caught. She just stared. Then she said softly, "I'm sorry." Grayson didn't blink. "So it's real?" Lila nodded once. "It's real." "Why?" His voice was calm, too calm. She set the laptop aside and leaned forward, elbows on her knees. She looked tired. Not from the day, from everything. "I wasn't looking for anything," she said. "I wasn't going to meet anyone. I don't know." "That's not good enough, Lila." She looked down. "I know." Grayson stepped further into the room. He stayed standing. "I saw the bio," he said. "The pictures. You're not just some bored person browsing. You've got captions, you've got edits. You're smiling in a way I haven't seen in a long time." Lila's eyes began to shine. "I needed to feel like someone still saw me." "I see you," Grayson said. "No, you don't," she whispered. "Not for a long time." He didn't know what to say to that. The silence between them pressed down like fog. Finally, she spoke again. You don't talk to me anymore. You talk at me. You tell me when you're late, when you're tired, when a deal goes through. But you don't ask how I'm doing. You don't touch me. You don't look at me like you used to. I've been working, he said. I've been trying to... To what? Lila snapped. To give us a future? We already had a present, and you let it die. That landed like a slap. He stepped back. I didn't cheat, she said. Not physically. I never even replied to anyone. I made the profile and I scrolled, that's all. You still lied, he said. I know. I trusted you. I know. Her voice cracked then, and tears slipped down her cheeks. I didn't do it to hurt you, she said. I did it because I already felt hurt, and alone, and like I wasn't even a person in this house anymore. Grayson stared at her, the woman he loved, the woman who now felt like a stranger. The silence stretched again. Then he turned around and walked out of the room without another word. Grayson sat at the kitchen table in the dark. The silence in the house was louder than usual. The refrigerator hummed quietly behind him. The clock ticked on the wall. Everything felt like it had shifted by a few degrees. He poured himself a glass of water and didn't drink it. Instead, he stared through the window above the sink, watching the sky start to lighten just barely. His mind kept circling the same question. How long had she felt this way? He couldn't remember the last time they really talked. Not about errands, not about the business, but about them. They used to stay up for hours, talking about everything. Stupid dreams, weird facts, their childhood stories. That first year of their marriage had been so full of small moments. Laughing in the car, making pancakes on Sundays, holding hands in the grocery store. Now, they barely touched. When had things changed? Later that morning, the house was quiet again. Grayson went to his office and sat in the chair by the window. He picked up a framed photo from the shelf, their 3rd anniversary. She was smiling up at him. He was already half absorbed in his phone. He stared at the image, then turned it face down. Downstairs, Lila moved like a ghost, rinsing a mug, pacing the kitchen, sitting on the back porch with a cup of tea that went cold. They didn't speak again. Not that day. Not yet. That evening, Grayson didn't go to the office. Instead, he took a walk. No driver, no meetings, just himself. He ended up near the little cafe where he first saw Lila, back when they were nobodies. Back when love was new and simple and funny. He remembered how she had handed him a napkin and told him to slow down. He stood outside the cafe for a while, watched a young couple laugh through the window. Then he pulled an old receipt from his wallet, their second date Thai takeout. On the back he scribbled a message, just a few words. He didn't send it. He took it home, walked to Lila's studio, the room he hadn't entered in months, and slipped the receipt under the door. No note, just a memory, waiting to be found. They used to talk for hours. Late nights on the floor of their first apartment, eating noodles straight from the pot, laughing about nothing, making plans about everything. Travel, kids, the kind of house they'd buy, the kind of people they wanted to become. Those memories didn't come all at once. They returned slowly, the way warm water rises around you. Not sharp, just present. Grayson stood at the edge of the kitchen counter the next morning, nursing a lukewarm coffee. Lila hadn't come downstairs yet, or maybe she had earlier while he was out walking. They were still in the same house, but they had become excellent at missing each other without ever leaving the room. It hadn't always been like this. He remembered the first time he saw her cry, not at a funeral, not in a fight, but over a dog food commercial that reminded her of her childhood dog. He had made a dumb joke to lighten the mood, and she threw a pillow at him, then laughed through her tears. Back then, everything was new, not perfect, but full of life. They weren't rich yet. He was freelancing out of a shared workspace, taking meetings in cafes, eating frozen pizza 5 nights a week. Lila was juggling 2 jobs, one at a small ad agency, the other painting murals for nurseries. They were tired all the time, but they were tired together, and that made all the difference. Success came slowly, then all at once. Grayson's startup hit a breakthrough. A tech partner went viral. Investors lined up. Within a year they had moved into a larger apartment, then a townhouse, then the mansion on the hill. Every step forward was celebrated, until the celebrations became handshakes, until he was home less often, until weekends turned into work retreats, and Lila stopped coming along because she said they weren't fun anymore. He thought she was just being patient, but she had already started feeling left behind. The turning point was subtle. Grayson was preparing for a major pitch, their biggest yet. He was on his third cup of coffee, and halfway through a rehearsal when Lila walked into his office holding a sonogram photo. She didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway with wide eyes and shaking hands. He looked at her, looked at the photo, then checked his watch. "We'll talk after the meeting," he said. He didn't mean it to sound cold, but by the time he returned, she had already left for her sister's. And when she came back 3 days later, there was no photo, no conversation, only silence. Later, she told him she had miscarried. Alone. He didn't know what to say. There were other moments too, small things, like when she stopped wearing her favorite perfume, when he stopped asking if she wanted dessert, when they spent anniversaries celebrating next week and never did. He still bought her flowers, but they stayed in the wrapper on the counter. Neither of them put them in water. She still said love you when she left the house, but it started to sound like bye. And Grayson convinced himself that marriages always settled, that after the magic faded, what remained was stability, and that stability was enough. He had no idea how wrong he was. Lila stood in her studio, brushing a layer of dust off the old easel she hadn't used in months. It was tucked in the corner behind a stack of unused canvases and unopened acrylics. The receipt Grayson had slid under her door was still on the table. She hadn't picked it up, but she had looked at it, again and again. She wasn't sure what she was waiting for. Maybe she was scared of what it meant, that he remembered, that he cared enough to remember. Or maybe it made her feel guilty for assuming he didn't. But the hurt was still there. She didn't feel seen. Not really. Not for a long time. And it wasn't just the big moments, the missed anniversaries, the empty dinners. It was all the little moments that got swallowed by silence. She had once spilled wine on a client's new carpet. She panicked and called Grayson, needing comfort. But he was boarding a plane and barely listened. She had once gotten her first mural published in a design magazine. She left the article on his desk. He never mentioned it. And slowly, she stopped telling him things. What was the point? He would nod, say, "That's nice," and go back to work. She started keeping her wins to herself, and her losses too. They became polite, efficient, roommates. One night, nearly a year ago, she had sat on the edge of their bed trying to talk to him. "Do you think we're still happy?" she asked. Grayson didn't even look up from his laptop. "Of course," he said. "Why wouldn't we be?" And that was the moment she knew he wasn't really there anymore. Grayson walked down the hallway and stopped outside her studio. The door was closed. He stared at the handle for a moment, then turned away. He didn't want to intrude. Not yet. Instead, he walked into the guest room, the one where he had slept a few nights after late returns. The bed was made perfectly. A little too perfectly. On the nightstand was a book Lila had once recommended to him. It still had the bookmark halfway through. He had told her he'd read it, that they'd talk about it together, but he never did. Now he picked it up, sat on the edge of the bed, and started reading. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through her old sketchbooks. Pages and pages of them, faces, places, fragments of dreams. So many of them featured Grayson, even in small ways. A smile, a suit jacket, the outline of his shoulders resting against a subway window. Her hands slowed on a page from early in their marriage. It was a drawing of him, asleep on the couch, his head tilted, mouth slightly open, one sock half off. She had written underneath it, "My forever." She closed the sketchbook gently. It was strange how grief could creep in even when nothing had ended. She was grieving a version of him that still existed, just not with her anymore. That night, they crossed paths in the hallway. She was carrying laundry. He was headed to the kitchen. They stopped, looked at each other. Neither moved for a second. Then Grayson spoke. "Do you want to sit?" Lila hesitated, then nodded. They ended up on the back porch, no words at first, just the soft buzz of crickets and the faint rustle of wind through the trees. "I don't know where to start," he said. "You don't have to say everything tonight," Lila replied. "Just something." Grayson looked out at the dark yard. "I've been thinking about that apartment," he said. "The one with the leaky sink." Lila smiled faintly. "And the closet that wouldn't shut." He turned to her. "We were broke and tired, and somehow we were so happy." She nodded. "I think I lost track of that," he said. "Of you, of what mattered." Lila's voice was quiet. "I stopped trying to be seen because it hurt too much to stay invisible." He didn't try to defend himself this time, he just nodded. "I want to fix this," he said, "if we still can." Lila didn't answer right away. Then she reached into her pocket and handed him the folded receipt. "I kept it," she said. Grayson opened it. On the back, underneath his old handwriting, she had written something new. "Come back slow, but come back real." The next morning, Grayson made pancakes. From an old recipe in a box neither of them had touched in years. When she walked in and saw him at the stove, her eyes softened. "You remembered," she said. "I never forgot," he replied. They ate together in silence, but when their hands brushed across the table, neither pulled away. It started with a knock, a soft one, hesitant, like someone unsure if they were welcome. Grayson looked up from the tablet in his lap. He had been rereading the same sentence for 20 minutes. The knock was almost a relief. He stood and opened the door. Lila stood there in her socks and sweater, hair tied up, no makeup. Her eyes looked tired but less guarded than before. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "Of course," Grayson said. She stepped inside the office, a place she hadn't entered in months. The whiteboard was clean, the desk was cleared, his laptop was closed. It was the first time in years the room looked like it was meant for a conversation, not a conquest. "I think I need to say some things out loud," she said. He nodded and gestured to the couch. They sat at opposite ends, facing forward. "I don't know where to start," she said. "You can start anywhere," Grayson replied. "I'll listen." She folded her hands in her lap and looked down. "I don't think I realized how lonely I was until I stopped pretending I wasn't." Grayson didn't speak. He let the words settle. "I would walk through this house," she continued, "and feel like a guest. Not because of the size, not because of the space, but because I didn't feel like it belonged to both of us anymore." He turned slightly toward her. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I did," Lila said, "just not with words you understood." She turned to him now. "Every time I went quiet during dinner. Every time I stayed upstairs instead of sitting next to you on the couch. Every time I said, 'It's fine,' when it wasn't." She swallowed hard. "That was me telling you." Grayson exhaled, slow and long. "I thought giving you space was respecting you. I thought if I didn't push, you'd come to me when you were ready." She shook her head. "I needed you to knock, not wait." Grayson leaned back, his hands clasped loosely between his knees. "I didn't know you felt that invisible," he said. "You didn't want to know," Lila replied gently, "and I stopped wanting to remind you." There was no edge to her voice, just truth, and that hurt worse than anger. "I thought I was protecting us," Grayson said, "by not fighting, by keeping things calm." Lila smiled faintly. "Avoiding isn't the same as protecting. I see that now." A long pause passed between them. Then she spoke again. "You know, I used to rehearse conversations with you in my head, things I wanted to say, how I felt, what I missed, but by the time I saw you at the end of the day, you looked so tired, or preoccupied, or gone." She rubbed the edge of her sweater sleeve. "And I didn't want to add weight." "I never saw you as a burden," he said quickly. "But I felt like one," she said. "I felt like something you had to manage, like you were grateful I wasn't complaining, like silence made me easy." Grayson bowed his head. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not just for that, for all of it, for shrinking you by accident." Lila looked over at him. "I don't need you to be perfect, Grayson. I never did. I just needed to matter." He blinked slowly. You do. Then say it. Say things like that, out loud, even when they feel obvious. He nodded. Then softly she asked, "Do you still love me?" He looked at her. Really looked at her. "Yes," he said. "But I think I forgot how to show it. I forgot love isn't just staying, it's seeing." Tears welled in her eyes. She wiped them quickly. "I don't want a perfect marriage," she said. "I just want a present one." Grayson reached across the space between them and took her hand. "I can do present," he whispered. They sat in silence for a long time, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full, of weight, of breath, of everything that hadn't been said for too long. "I want to ask you something," Lila said quietly. "Anything. Why didn't you follow me when I walked away all those times? When I left the room? When I cried and said nothing?" Grayson hesitated. "Because I was afraid." "Of me?" "Of failing you," he said. "Of trying to fix something and making it worse. I thought, if I gave you time, space, patience, you'd come back." She nodded slowly. "But I didn't want space. I wanted to feel like I was worth interrupting your work for." Grayson looked down at their joined hands. "I didn't realize how loud my absence had become," he whispered. Lila pulled her knees up on the couch. "I remember one night. I told you I was scared I was becoming someone I didn't like. I thought you'd ask what I meant. Instead, you kissed my forehead and said, 'You're strong, you'll be okay.'" He closed his eyes. "I thought I was reassuring you." "I know, but I didn't need reassurance. I needed you to sit with me in the mess." Grayson turned toward her, eyes open now. "I want to learn how," he said. "You'll mess up," she replied. "I know. But I want you to try." "I'm here," he said. "I'm not leaving. I'm not asking you to stay." She looked at him softly. "I'm asking you to show up." He nodded, the kind of nod that meant more than agreement. It meant promise. They sat that way until the sun shifted and the shadows on the walls turned gold. No more pretending, no more silence, just two people broken and breathing, together. As the light faded from the room, Grayson broke the silence. "There's something I never asked you," he said. "And I think I've been avoiding it." Lila turned toward him, brows slightly furrowed. "That day," he said, voice low. "The sonogram. When you showed it to me and I said we'd talk later, and then I didn't." He paused. "I'm so sorry." Lila didn't respond right away. She looked down, brushing a bit of lint from her sweater. Her voice was soft when she spoke. "I carried that moment for months," she said. "I kept trying to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it felt, that you were just distracted, that it wasn't rejection." She met his eyes. "But it felt like rejection." Grayson nodded slowly. "I was scared." Lila's voice broke a little. "I needed you to be there, not perfect, just there. I should have dropped everything. I should have asked how you felt. I should have—" "You didn't," she said gently, "and that's what stayed with me." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. "I felt so alone in that loss, and I told myself not to blame you, that you didn't know how to handle it, that maybe I wasn't even being fair." Grayson's voice cracked. "You were being more than fair." They both sat with it, that wound, finally acknowledged. And then Grayson said, "I think part of me didn't grieve because I didn't feel I deserved to." "You do," she said quietly. "It happened to both of us." They didn't speak for a while after that. But something had shifted, not fixed, but softened. They stayed in the office as the light dimmed. The walls glowed with soft gold until the last hints of sunset vanished behind the hills. Lila leaned back, her head resting against the couch cushion. "I think I stopped trusting you without realizing it," she said. "Not because you did something malicious, but because I didn't feel like I could count on you to notice me." Grayson nodded. "I think I started mistaking being reliable for being emotionally present." "You've always been dependable," she said. "You paid bills, you kept promises, you stayed. But I didn't feel safe." He looked at her, eyes searching. "How do I rebuild that?" Lila was quiet for a moment. "Ask me questions." "Like what?" Like how I'm doing, how my day really was, what I'm afraid of, what I dream about now, not 10 years ago. He nodded slowly. And if I don't always know what to say? Then just say that, she said. I'd rather have honesty than empty comfort. Grayson leaned forward. What are you afraid of now? She blinked. Right now? He nodded. I'm afraid we'll fall back into patterns, that this is just a moment, and tomorrow we'll pretend everything is fine and go back to pretending we're okay. We won't, he said. I'm also afraid that I've changed too much, she said. That I'm not the version of myself you fell in love with. Grayson took a breath. You're not. She looked startled. But neither am I, he added. And I think maybe we need to fall in love again. Not with memories, with who we are now. Her eyes softened. I'd like that, she said. He smiled. Then let's start slow. She reached for his hand again. He didn't let go. Later that night, they sat at the kitchen table with mugs of tea between them. No music, no distractions, just steam and the hum of the refrigerator. I think, Lila said carefully, that if we're going to really try, we need to define what trying looks like. Grayson nodded. What do you need? She didn't answer right away. Then, I need presence, intentional time, not a scheduled date night just to check a box, but dinner at the table, no phones, a walk after work, real conversation. He nodded. Okay, I can do that. She took a breath. And I need to be touched, not out of habit, out of care. A hand on my back when I walk by. A kiss that isn't just routine. Grayson looked at her, serious. What else? I need us to say things before they fester. No more brushing things off to keep peace. He reached for his mug. I need something too. Lila waited. I need patience, he said. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to forget some things, but I want you to believe that I'm trying, that I mean it. I believe it now, she said softly. And I need you to tell me when I miss the mark. Don't let silence grow again. I won't, she said. They sat for a while longer, sipping quietly. Then Grayson pulled a small notebook from a drawer. What's that? Something I bought months ago. I wanted to use it for work, but maybe... He flipped to the first page. At the top he wrote, How we stay connected. Lila smiled, and in the margin she wrote, Start small, stay soft, show up. The next morning tested them. It wasn't dramatic, just real. Grayson had a call scheduled with a major investor. It ran long. He missed breakfast. Lila had made eggs, nothing fancy, just enough for both of them. By the time she realized he wasn't coming, the food was cold. She stood at the counter, looking at the empty place setting. Her gut reaction was familiar, disappointment followed by quiet retreat. Old patterns whispered, Don't say anything. Let it go. But then she remembered, say it before it festers. So when Grayson walked into the kitchen, she didn't smile and pretend everything was fine. She looked him in the eye and said, I made breakfast. I waited. He stopped, guilt flashing across his face. I'm sorry. I should have texted. I lost track of time. I know, she said. But it felt like before, like I didn't matter again. And I need to tell you when I feel that, even if it's small. He stepped closer. I'm really sorry. Can we start the morning over? She hesitated, then nodded. He reheated the eggs and made new toast. They ate at the table, slowly, together. And when he was done, he said, Thank you for not letting that become another crack. She smiled. Thank you for showing up. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. They both felt it. It wasn't the breakfast. It was the repair, the willingness to pause, rewind, and try again, without blaming, without retreating. Grayson wrote it down later in the notebook. Day 1, messed up, listened, rebuilt. That was enough. That evening they sat side by side on the couch, not talking, just watching an old movie they both used to love. Halfway through, Lila muted the TV. Grayson turned, curious. There's something I want to ask, she said. But I'm scared it'll sound shallow. Ask anyway, he said. She hesitated, then said, Do you still find me attractive? He blinked, caught off guard. She looked down quickly. It's okay if you don't know. Over time, I stopped feeling like someone you looked at. Grayson set the remote down. "Lila," he said softly, "I didn't stop looking because you changed. I stopped looking because I thought I didn't deserve to anymore." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He took a breath. "When I saw you pulling away, part of me assumed it was because you didn't want me anymore. So I backed off. I told myself I was giving you space, but really, I was retreating, hiding from rejection." "I thought I was invisible," she said, "and I thought I was unwanted." They both laughed, a short, ironic breath of air. "Well, we really nailed communication," she said, wiping her eyes. He reached for her hand. "You are beautiful. Still. Always. But more than that. I want to make you feel chosen again." She looked at him. "Then keep choosing me," she whispered. "I will. Even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they finished the movie in silence. But this time, the silence was full, present, connected, safe. Later that night, after the movie ended and the lights were off, they lay in bed side by side, not touching, not speaking, just breathing in the same quiet. Then Grayson whispered, "Can I tell you something I've never said out loud?" Lila shifted toward him. "Of course. I've always been afraid I was more impressive than I was lovable." She didn't respond right away. He continued, "Even when we first met, I thought I won you because I was ambitious, driven. I thought if I slowed down, if I became soft, you'd lose interest." Lila's brows pulled together in a quiet ache. "Grayson." He turned his head on the pillow, facing her in the dark. "So I kept building things, kept pushing, even when we were stable, even when we were already okay. I didn't know how to stop proving I was worth staying for." "You never had to prove that to me," she said softly. "I didn't know how to believe that." She reached over and found his hand in the dark, held it tightly. "I loved you when you were broke," she said. "When your idea wasn't even an idea yet. When you worked nights at that tiny office that smelled like ramen and printer ink." "I remember," he said, smiling faintly. "You didn't win me with success," she said. "You won me with attention, with care, with showing up." Grayson closed his eyes. "I want to be that man again." "You already are," she said. "You just stopped believing it." He kissed her hand, and for the first time in a long time, he believed her. The following week passed slowly, but differently. Lila painted again, not for a commission, not for social media, just for herself. The canvas leaned against the porch wall in the late morning light, half-finished but full of warmth. Grayson started keeping a journal, just small entries, 3 lines a day, about what he noticed, what he learned, what he still didn't understand. They weren't perfect. Some days they forgot, fell into old habits, missed cues. But now, they said something when that happened. "Hey, I felt alone today. I missed breakfast again, that's on me. I need to be held tonight, just held." They added a new ritual. Sunday evenings, they sat on the floor of the living room and asked each other 5 questions. Sometimes funny, sometimes hard, always real. "What surprised you this week? What do you need more of? What scared you? When did you feel most connected to me? What's something you wish I'd noticed?" The answers weren't always easy, but they were always honest. One Sunday, Lila asked, "Do you think we'll ever feel brand new again?" Grayson thought for a long moment. "I don't know," he said. "But maybe we're not meant to feel brand new. Maybe we're meant to feel known, and still wanted." She smiled at that. And then, one rainy afternoon, without ceremony or planning, she reached into a drawer and pulled out their wedding vows. They read them together, sitting cross-legged on the bed, listening to the rain. When they finished, Grayson looked at her and said, "We got some of this wrong." She nodded. "And some of it right." He folded the paper and handed it back to her. "Let's rewrite the rest. This time, together." A few nights later, Grayson was the last one downstairs. He turned off the lights, checked the doors, and stood for a moment in the kitchen, alone, barefoot, quiet. He looked at the tea mugs drying by the sink, the half-used notebook on the counter, the blanket folded neatly on the couch they'd shared during last night's thunderstorm. None of these things were dramatic. None of them were declarations, but they were real. He reached for the notebook, flipped it open to a blank page, and wrote, Day 8, still learning, still scared, still choosing her. Then he added a line underneath, and she's still choosing me. He closed the book, set it down, and headed upstairs. When he entered the bedroom, Lila was already in bed, reading. She looked up and he saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen in a long time. Not relief, not forgiveness. Invitation. He crossed the room and slid under the covers beside her. Hi, she said softly. Hi. They lay there for a moment, not needing to fill the silence, and then, almost shyly, she asked, What did you write tonight? Grayson smiled. That we're still choosing each other. Lila set her book aside and turned off the lamp. Let's keep choosing. We will, he whispered, and as she reached for his hand beneath the sheets, he closed his eyes. Not because he was tired, but because for the first time in a long time, he felt safe enough to rest. That weekend, they took a drive with no destination, the kind they used to take in the early years, just get in the car and let the road decide. They stopped at a lake they hadn't visited in over a decade. It was mostly empty, quiet, the water still. The kind of place that made you whisper even when you didn't need to. Lila walked to the edge of the dock. Grayson followed. For a long while they just stood there. No pictures, no phones, no plans. Remember when we talked about moving here? She asked. He smiled. We couldn't afford a couch at the time. But we had ideas, she said. Dreams that didn't need finishing. We still do, he said. She turned toward him. What's your dream now? He looked at her for a long moment. That 10 years from now we still fight for the soft parts, the quiet, the ordinary. Lila nodded slowly. And mine. Is that 10 years from now? We're not strangers to each other again. He reached out and laced his fingers through hers. We won't be, he said, because this time we're not chasing perfect. We're chasing real. They stood there as the wind passed gently over the water, carrying nothing but the smell of pine and the sound of time moving forward. Later, back in the car, she leaned her head on his shoulder, and for once, neither of them had anything left to say, because sometimes healing doesn't sound like a speech. Sometimes it just sounds like someone breathing beside you and choosing to stay together, still. That night before bed, Grayson added one more line to the notebook. Day 9. Ordinary is enough, as long as we're in it together. And this time he signed it, both of their names. He closed the notebook and turned off the light, carrying hope into the dark with him. The change didn't happen all at once. There were no fireworks, no tearful declarations that healed everything in a single moment, just small, quiet things that felt different. And maybe that's what real healing looks like. It began with how they looked at each other. There was less calculation, less scanning for signs of disappointment, more curiosity, more softness. Lila noticed it first when Grayson caught her coming down the stairs with paint smudged on her cheek. He didn't point it out. He didn't laugh. He just smiled, like she was someone worth noticing. It had been a long time since she'd felt noticed. She walked into the kitchen, still holding that smile, and poured coffee into 2 mugs instead of 1. Grayson noticed it too, in the way Lila paused before she spoke now. She had a habit, built from years of being brushed off, of giving up mid-sentence, like her words were waiting for permission to exist. But lately, she finished her thoughts, and he listened. He didn't always have the right thing to say. Sometimes he'd repeat her words back just to be sure he'd heard them right. And she would nod, sometimes tearing up, sometimes not, but always knowing he was there, present. They were both learning to stay in the moment longer than they used to, not to fix it, just to witness it. And that was new. They started walking in the evenings. It wasn't a decision so much as a rhythm that returned. Sometimes they talked about old vacations, new recipes, what to plant in the garden this spring. Other times they walked in silence, side by side, hands barely brushing, but always together. One night as they crossed the quiet neighborhood cul-de-sac, Lila said, "Do you think people can fall in love with the same person twice?" Grayson didn't answer right away. "I think," he said, "people can fall in love with the truth, and sometimes that truth is the person they forgot to look at." She smiled at that. That night, before bed, he wrote in the notebook. Day 12. She asked a question that scared me. I didn't flinch. They also started cooking together again. It was awkward at first, two people learning how to move around each other without colliding. Grayson burned the onions. Lila forgot the rice. But they laughed. And when the food turned out edible but bland, they ate every bite with gratitude, not for the meal, but for the company. They cleaned up without assigning blame. No teasing, no sighs. Grayson washed. Lila dried. He handed her a dish, and she said, "Thank you." Two words that sounded brand new. He looked at her, startled by the softness in her voice. "You're welcome," he said. And he meant it. They reintroduced music to the house. For months the silence had been loud. No playlists, no background humming while cooking. Just the low murmur of television or the clack of keyboards. But one afternoon, Lila pulled out the old Bluetooth speaker and played a song from their honeymoon, a soft acoustic tune that once made them sway barefoot on a balcony in Florence. Grayson stopped what he was doing. He stood in the middle of the room, quietly listening. Then, without a word, he walked over to her, held out his hand and waited. She raised an eyebrow. "Here?" she asked. "Why not?" She laughed. Not a big one, but the kind that cracked something open. So they danced. No rhythm, no technique, just warmth. Their feet bumped, her head rested against his chest. And when the music faded, they stayed close a while longer, swaying to nothing. Later that night, Grayson wrote, Day 15, danced in the kitchen. Forgot the world for 3 minutes. That counts. One morning, Grayson found Lila in the garden, hands in the dirt, planting herbs. She had always talked about starting a garden, but life had always gotten in the way. Now, she was doing it. "Need help?" he asked. She looked up, hair messy, face glowing. "No," she said, "but I'd like the company." He grabbed a small shovel and joined her in the dirt, and neither of them said anything more. Of course, not everything was smooth. One afternoon, Grayson got a call from a former colleague, someone who had once criticized Lila's art in a public interview. He took the call anyway. Lila overheard part of the conversation and froze in the hallway. Later, when he found her in the bedroom, she was quiet, not angry, just distant. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I heard who called," she said. He nodded. "Yeah, I wasn't expecting it." "You still took it." Grayson sighed. "It was reflex. I didn't think it through." Lila didn't respond. He sat down beside her. "I don't have an excuse, but I want to hear how that felt to you." She looked at him. "Like I wasn't a factor in the decision," she said. "Like I'm not part of the equation you calculate before you act." He nodded slowly. "That's fair." She blinked. "You're not defending yourself?" "No," he said. "I'm learning." A long pause passed. Then she said, "Thank you for asking how I felt. That's new." He gave a small smile. "Trying to make that the norm." That night he wrote, Day 18, I defaulted to old habits. But this time I stayed in the conversation. Growth is slower than guilt, but more honest. They didn't pretend to be healed. But they had stopped pretending nothing needed healing, and that alone changed everything. On their first weekend without plans, they stayed in bed until noon, not out of laziness, but because the bed finally felt like a place for rest again, not avoidance, not tension. Grayson read. Lila doodled in the margins of an old sketchbook. At one point, he leaned over and showed her a paragraph from his book, something about resilience and softness coexisting. She smiled, then underlined the sentence with her pencil. Later, she tore out the page and tucked it in the notebook on the kitchen counter. That night, they added a new question to their Sunday ritual. What made you feel safe this week? Grayson answered, This morning. Lila answered, The way you looked at me when I wasn't saying anything. One afternoon, they visited the bookstore where they used to spend entire Sundays. They didn't buy much, just 2 paperbacks and a greeting card with no occasion attached. Grayson picked up the card while Lila wasn't looking and wrote a note inside later that night, "Still choosing you, even on the quiet days." He left it on her pillow. She didn't mention it, but the next morning she tucked it in her coat pocket before leaving the house. It stayed there for the rest of the week. One evening, Lila pulled a shoebox from the closet. It was filled with old photos, printed ones from their early years, road trips, birthdays, lazy Sunday mornings. They sat on the floor and went through them one by one. "This was the day you cooked breakfast and nearly set off the smoke alarm," she said, holding up a photo of Grayson grinning with a blackened pan. He laughed. "You still ate it." "I was in love," she said, then added, "Still am. But now I also have standards." They laughed again. As the pile of photos thinned, Grayson picked one near the bottom. It was Lila, asleep on the couch, arms tucked under her head, the dog curled beside her. A beam of light framed her face like something sacred. "I remember this day," he said softly. "You looked so peaceful. I just wanted to protect that feeling." She looked at the photo, then at him. "Then let's protect it together." They added the photo to the notebook and wrote underneath, "Peace can be kept when both people hold it gently." That night, Grayson didn't write in the notebook. He didn't need to. The day had spoken for itself, and for once the quiet between them felt exactly like love. Not loud, but steady, and very much alive. A few days later, they were sitting on the porch, watching the sky fade into dusk. Lila leaned her head on Grayson's shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever go back to what we were?" she asked. Grayson took a long breath before answering. "No," he said. "But I think we're building something better, something honest, something we don't have to hide in." Lila nodded. "Then let's keep going," she whispered. And as the stars began to emerge, one by one, neither of them moved. They didn't need to. Some days would be hard, but for the first time in a long time, they both believed in what came next, not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. And they stayed there, without a word. It arrived on a Tuesday, tucked into a thick ivory envelope with delicate gold script across the front. Lila found it in the mailbox, wedged between a water bill and a coupon flyer. She almost didn't notice it. But when she saw the return address, her breath caught. Grayson was in the kitchen, feeding the dog when she walked in holding the envelope. "This came," she said. He glanced up, wiping his hands. "What is it?" She handed it to him without a word. He read the sender's name, then blinked. "Your cousin Emily," he said. "She's getting married?" Lila nodded slowly. "She wants us there?" Another nod. They stood in silence for a moment. Emily was the cousin who had once pulled Lila aside at a family gathering and whispered, "You deserve someone who actually pays attention to you." It hadn't come from cruelty, but it had stayed lodged in Lila's chest for years. That had been 3 Thanksgivings ago. She hadn't seen Emily since. Grayson turned the envelope over in his hands. "It's just an invitation," he said carefully. Lila leaned against the counter. "It's also a mirror." He understood what she meant. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about showing up, as a couple, as a story people hadn't seen unfold, as the people they had been, and the people they might be now. "Do you want to go?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "Do you?" Grayson set the envelope down on the table and sat across from her. "I think," he said slowly, "I want us to be strong enough to go, but I don't want us to prove anything." Lila looked at him. "You mean you don't want to fake it?" "I mean I don't want to perform," he said. "I don't want to rehearse what to say or guess what people are thinking. I just want to be there with you, fully." She nodded, unsure how to answer. The wedding was a month away, not far, not close, just enough time for hesitation to become pressure. "What if people ask questions?" she said quietly. "What if someone brings up before?" "Then we can tell the truth," he said, "that we're still learning, still choosing." Lila let out a small breath. "That's not the kind of answer people expect at weddings." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's the kind they need." They didn't RSVP right away. Instead, they sat with the question for a few days. sometimes talking about it, sometimes letting it rest beside them like a third person at the table. On the fourth evening, Grayson found Lila in the living room, holding a dress from the back of her closet. It was the one she wore to a friend's wedding 5 years ago. Bright blue, off the shoulder, elegant, confident. "Still fits," she said. He looked at her like she was the only one in the room. It never stopped. They mailed the RSVP the next morning. Lila watched the envelope disappear into the mailbox and felt her stomach flutter. Not from fear, from the unknown. It had been a long time since they'd gone somewhere as Grayson and Lila. No caveats, no whispered arguments on the way there, no strained smiles held together by tension. Now they were stepping into the open again, not to prove themselves, but to live truthfully, in front of others. The days leading up to the wedding were quiet. They didn't talk about it obsessively. Instead, they prepared in little ways. Lila tried on makeup looks in the bathroom mirror, her eyeliner uneven but her smile steady. Grayson got his suit dry cleaned and bought new cufflinks. When she saw them, she laughed softly. "You're nervous," he shrugged. "Just want to feel ready." She touched his shoulder. "You already are." The night before the wedding, they went for a walk. The air was brisk, the moon high. Lila stopped near the bench by the park entrance and turned to him. "Promise me something?" she asked. Grayson nodded. "Anything. If I get overwhelmed tomorrow, don't try to fix it. Just find me. Be near." He reached for her hand. "I'll be right beside you, even in the quiet." She squeezed his fingers once. "Then I think I'll be okay." The wedding day arrived with the scent of spring in the air. Grayson adjusted his tie 3 times before Lila came down the stairs. She wore the blue dress, her hair pinned loosely, soft curls framing her face. She didn't look like someone trying to impress. She looked like herself, centered, open, whole. Grayson stared for a moment, breath caught. "You look like a wish someone made years ago," he said. Lila laughed. "Cheesy, but I'll take it." The ceremony was held at a vineyard outside the city. Rows of white chairs, strings of fairy lights, soft piano in the background. It looked like something from a movie. As they stepped onto the gravel path together, Lila slipped her hand into Grayson's. He didn't squeeze too tight. He didn't let go. They greeted family, nodded at curious glances, and deflected small talk with grace. When someone asked, "So how are you two doing?" Grayson smiled and said, "We're showing up, every day." It wasn't rehearsed, but it was true. At the reception, Emily pulled Lila aside. "You came," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "Of course," Lila replied. "I wasn't sure," Emily said. "After what I said to you that night," Lila nodded. "You weren't wrong, just early." Emily's eyes softened. "You seem different." "I am," Lila said. "We both are. But it took some falling apart." Emily leaned in. "It looks like you landed together." Lila smiled. "We're still landing." Later, after dinner and speeches, the music began. Grayson and Lila stood near the edge of the dance floor, watching couples sway under the lights. He turned to her, offered his hand. "Want to?" Lila hesitated. She saw the eyes, some curious, some kind, some uncertain. But then she looked at Grayson, and nothing else mattered. She took his hand. They stepped onto the floor, slow and quiet. There was no choreography, just 2 people who had learned to listen in silence. Grayson's hand rested gently on her waist. Lila's head leaned softly against his shoulder. "I was afraid we'd never have moments like this again," he murmured. "We almost didn't," she said. He nodded. "Thank you for staying." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Thank you for coming back." They didn't speak after that. They just moved together. 2 people who knew what it felt like to lose each other and still find a way to hold on. The song ended, but neither of them left the floor. When they returned to their table, a small note had been left by their plates. It read, "You two give the kind of hope people pretend isn't possible." Neither of them recognized the handwriting, but both of them smiled. Because maybe it wasn't about being perfect. Maybe it was about being real, out loud. They left the reception just after sunset. The sky was painted in deep orange and fading violet. Grayson drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on Lila's knee. Neither spoke for a while. It wasn't silence born of exhaustion, it was peace. Finally, Lila said, "I was proud of us today." He glanced at her. "Yeah? I didn't think we'd ever be that couple again. The ones who make it through the dance, the questions, the memory of who we used to be." He nodded. "We weren't that couple again. We were someone new." She smiled. "I liked her," she said. "The version of me that showed up tonight." He reached for her hand. "I like him too." Back home, Lila kicked off her heels and went straight for the kitchen. She poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to Grayson. He took a sip, then held her gaze for a long moment. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking," he said, "we just lived through something we'll remember when we're old." She smiled, set her glass down, and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Then let's keep making those." They stood like that in the kitchen, no audience, no performance, just the two of them, still learning, still showing up, still choosing, together. Later that night, before bed, Grayson opened the notebook and wrote, "Day 26. We went out into the world and came home stronger." He paused, then added, "Sometimes love isn't what you feel, it's what you return to." He left the notebook on her pillow. When she found it, she smiled, and as she turned out the light, she whispered aloud, "We're doing this." And in the dark, Grayson whispered back, "Yes, we are." And for the first time, the future felt like a promise instead of a question. They didn't know it at the time, but that wedding, that night of soft music and gentle dancing, was the last big event before things got quieter. Not empty, just quieter. A month later, they found themselves doing something they hadn't done in years. House hunting, not because they needed more space, not because they were chasing a change, but because, for the first time in a long time, they wanted to build something new, not on top of the past, but beside it. The cottage they found wasn't perfect, the floor creaked, the fireplace didn't work. The wallpaper in the guest room looked like it hadn't been changed since the 80s, but it had a wide porch, and a garden, and a tree big enough for a swing. Lila stood in the middle of the empty living room the day they got the keys, spinning slowly in her socks. "I can see it," she whispered. Grayson leaned in the doorway. "See what?" "You, me, coffee on the porch, music in the kitchen, sunlight on the walls." He smiled. "Then let's make it real." They moved in on a Thursday, no fanfare, just boxes, paint cans, and the slow unfolding of a new life. Every scratch on the floor became a shared memory. Every nail in the wall was a joint decision, and every night, as they lay in bed, the silence felt softer, like it belonged to them. On their second weekend in the new place, Lila painted again, really painted. Not a mural, not a commission, just a canvas propped near the porch door, the light hitting it just right. Grayson watched her from the kitchen, coffee in hand. There was something in the way her shoulders moved, in the tilt of her head, that reminded him of the first time he saw her sketch in a notebook on a subway ride. She had always had that quiet pull, like gravity, in reverse. Later that afternoon, she called him out to see it. The canvas showed 2 chairs on a porch, empty but angled toward each other. The light hit them as if they were waiting, not forgotten. At the bottom, she'd written a title, "Still Choosing." Grayson didn't speak for a moment. Then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "It's us," he said. She nodded. "It always was." That night, Grayson opened the notebook. Day 40, she painted the quiet between us, and it looked like love. He closed the cover, ran his fingers along the edge, and placed it on the bookshelf beside their wedding album. Not hidden, but home. Spring turned to summer. They planted tomatoes. The dog found a favorite patch of sun on the kitchen floor. Most evenings they cooked barefoot, with the back door open and music playing low. They invited neighbors over once or twice, but mostly they kept the world small, not out of fear, out of peace. One Saturday, Lila caught Grayson out back, hammering wood in the garage. "What are you building?" she asked. He didn't turn around, just grinned over his shoulder. You'll see. 2 weeks later, he called her outside. On the far side of the garden, under the big tree, he had built a swing. It wasn't fancy, just wood and rope, but it held. Lila sat down slowly, pushing off the dirt with her toes. You remembered, she said. Grayson sat on the grass nearby. You told me once, back when we were still dating, that someday you wanted a tree swing. I didn't forget. She looked down at him. Even when things got hard? He nodded. Especially then. She rocked gently, the ropes creaking with each pass. Then she looked at him and whispered, We're okay now, aren't we? Grayson didn't rush to answer. He stood up, walked over, and took the swing's rope in his hand. We are. And he gave her a gentle push forward. Later that night, the two of them sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars blink into place. Lila sipped her tea. Grayson leaned back in the old wooden chair they'd found at a flea market. She turned to him. Do you think we'll ever stop needing to choose each other? Like, will it just feel natural someday? Grayson thought for a moment, then shook his head gently. I hope not. She raised an eyebrow. Because choosing means we're still awake, he said. Still showing up, still deciding to stay. I think that's what makes it feel real. Lila leaned her head against his shoulder. I like that. He kissed her temple. Me too. A breeze passed, lifting the edge of the blanket. In the quiet, neither of them thought about the past anymore, not with regret, not with shame. The pain had not vanished. It had simply softened, made room for other things, like laughter, and roots, and peace. Inside, the notebook sat untouched. There was no new entry, because some days love didn't need to be documented. Some days it was just lived, in the way she looked at him, in the way he leaned into her stillness, in the way they stayed. The next morning, Grayson woke first. He made coffee quietly, careful not to wake her, and stepped outside. The sun had just begun to rise over the trees, casting golden lines across the dewy grass. He looked out at the swing, the garden, the soft echo of what they'd built. Then he opened the notebook one last time. Day 60. The story didn't end. It simply became quiet enough to listen to. He set the book down, and as the door creaked open behind him, and he heard her footsteps join his, he smiled, because this was the ending they never knew they were allowed to have, the kind that stays. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel fragile. It felt forever.